Is something really different about Jungkook? And why is it becoming more obvious now? What are people feeling that no one can fully explain? Stay until the end and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe as we uncover a story filled with mystery, emotion, and a change that is getting harder to ignore. What if the feeling you tried to ignore is now impossible to deny? What if that quiet difference you once questioned is becoming clearer with every passing moment? And what if the reason everyone is talking about it now is because it can no longer be hidden in subtlety? Before you scroll away, pause and think, when did it stop being just a feeling? When did that subtle shift in Jungkook begin to feel real, undeniable, and strangely consistent? Because something is happening, and whether people can explain it or not, they can feel it more strongly than ever. First, it was easy to dismiss. Fleeting thought. Passing observation. Something that didn't feel solid enough to hold on to. Everything looked the same on the surface. The performances were still powerful, the presence still magnetic, the connection still intact. There was no clear sign, no obvious transformation. But beneath that familiarity, something was quietly shifting. And now that shift is becoming clearer. Not because it has suddenly appeared, but because it has grown. It has accumulated through moments, through expressions, through subtle changes that once felt too small to matter, but now form a pattern that cannot be ignored. It is no longer just a question. It is a realization. Something is different. And more importantly, it is becoming more noticeable. This is where the story changes. Because when something moves from subtle to visible, from uncertain to undeniable, it creates a different kind of attention. People are no longer just wondering, they are observing more closely, comparing more carefully, trying to understand what they are seeing. But the more they look, the more complex it becomes. Because the difference is still not something that can be easily explained. It exists in the way things feel. In the way presence carries a different weight. In the way moments seem to hold more depth than before. There is a shift in energy. Not a dramatic one. Not something that replaces what existed, but something that adds to it. A layer that changes the overall experience without altering the core. And that is why it feels so real. Because it is not about what has disappeared. It is about what has been added. There is a noticeable increase in awareness, a quiet sense of control that feels more intentional, a presence that seems more grounded, yet more guarded, a balance that feels different, as if something internal has shifted and is now influencing everything else. And people are feeling it. Not because they have been told to, not because there is a clear explanation, but because it is there, consistent and undeniable. This consistency is what transforms curiosity into certainty. Not certainty of understanding, but certainty of perception. The kind of certainty that says, something has changed, even if the reason remains unknown. There is also an emotional response that grows stronger as this realization spreads. Because noticing change in someone you have watched for so long is not neutral. It carries weight. It creates reflection. It raises questions that go beyond simple observation. Is this change a sign of growth? Is it a response to something deeper? Is it the natural evolution of someone who has lived under constant attention? Or is it something more complex, something shaped by moments that the world has never seen? These questions remain unanswered. And yet, they continue to exist, growing alongside the awareness of change. There is also something else happening, something quieter but equally important. Acceptance. Not immediate, not complete, but gradually forming. The understanding that not everything needs to be explained to be real. That some changes are meant to be felt rather than defined. That sometimes the most honest response is not to search for answers, but to acknowledge what is happening. Because what is happening is real. It is visible now in a way it wasn't before. Not fully, not completely, but enough to be recognized. Enough to be talked about. Enough to be felt by more people than ever before. And that is why the conversation has grown. Not because the mystery has been solved, but because the mystery has become clearer in its presence. It is no longer hidden in small moments. It is part of the overall experience. Part of how Jungkook is perceived now. Part of the way his presence is understood. And within that, there is something powerful. Because it shows that change does not need to be loud to be significant. It does not need to be explained to be meaningful. It does not need to be confirmed to be real. Simply needs to exist. And when it does, people feel it. They recognize it. They respond to it, even if they cannot fully explain it. As time continues, this awareness may deepen. The difference may become even more noticeable. Or it may settle into a new sense of familiarity, becoming part of what people recognize without questioning it. But right now, in this moment, it exists in a unique space. A space between uncertainty and recognition, between feeling and understanding, between what is visible and what remains just beyond explanation. And that space is what keeps the story alive, because it invites reflection. It invites curiosity. It invites people to look beyond what is obvious and consider what lies beneath. So if you are still feeling it, still noticing that quiet difference that has now become harder to ignore, then you are part of this moment. Not because you have the answers, but because you have recognized the shift. And sometimes that recognition is the most important part of the story. So don't stop here. Share what you feel. Leave your thoughts. Be part of the conversation that continues to grow, not because it has found the answer, but because the feeling has become too strong to ignore. And as that feeling grows stronger, something even more undeniable begins to take shape. People are no longer questioning if there is a difference, but how much it has changed. The conversation shifts from uncertainty to recognition, from quiet observation to shared awareness, and suddenly, what once felt subtle now feels almost impossible to overlook when watching Jungkook. There is a moment in every evolving story when the invisible becomes visible enough to alter perception permanently. This feels like that moment. Because now, even those who once hesitated to say anything are starting to acknowledge it. Not loudly, not dramatically, but with a quiet certainty that carries more weight than speculation ever could. It is no longer just a feeling hidden in doubt. It is a presence that continues to appear, consistently, across different moments. And consistency changes everything. Because when something appears again and again, in different contexts, in different situations, it stops feeling like coincidence. It starts to feel intentional, even if it isn't consciously so. It becomes part of how someone is experienced, not just a temporary variation. That is what makes this shift feel so real now. It is no longer something you catch once and question. It is something you notice repeatedly. Something that follows through moments. Something that stays. There is also a growing awareness that this change may not be something new at all, but something that has finally reached the surface. Something that has been forming quietly over time, shaped by experiences that were never fully visible, now beginning to show itself in subtle but undeniable ways.